You can't rely on motivation. You have to rely on discipline. Lived in a shipping container for 3 months. My first major, I had massive imposter syndrome. Daily training is evidence that I stack up. I absolutely know that I can do really well in this race. And that's where your belief comes in. Now, I think we're unbreakable due to those experiences. He kept saying to me, you're going to do so well in this. I came about 70th. It was a really humbling time.
How did they make you feel after the race? Hey everyone, just a quickie before we get into the conversation. The podcast is always going to be free, so I'm never going to ask you to pay for anything. But if you could do me the kindness of subscribing and maybe leaving a review, that would mean the absolute world to me. Thank you and enjoy the episode. Zara, welcome to the podcast. Your bio reads as follows. Elite 15 HYROX athlete, ranked number 2 in the UK and 9th in the world. Pro doubles and mixed relay world champion, alongside your teammates, of course. Puma, built for athletes, and ESN athlete. Your most recent race in Hong Kong at the end of 2024 saw your highest ever finished with 6th place. And your PB is a 1:02.15, which you set at the Elite Women's in Amsterdam 2024. You're also a dedicated coach and a wife. It's not a bad CV, is it? I thought I'd start by asking you this. Could you tell the audience and me the significance of the words jumper and swimming pool?
When I was younger, probably where a lot of my competitive side came from, which was quite early adopted from my parents. But my mum and dad put me in swimming lessons because they wanted me to swim and not drown when I was younger. And back in those days, to do your personal survival stuff, you jumped in the pool with your clothes on. So normally it was like light pajamas, right? So it wasn't too much of a test. Yeah, I'm sure you did it. But my mum actually decided that she would give me the heaviest purple jumper that she possibly could find. I think it could have even been knitted, from another family member. But she gave me that and used to make me jump in for my swimming lessons in it. And basically, I had to swim. And it was a good starting point, I think, in life because it made me more resilient. It definitely crafted, I think, probably some of my characteristics and personality traits that I live by now in terms of doing hard things. But yeah, that was the relevance. I used to do a lot of jumping in the swimming pool in a jumper.
Yeah, your first weighted vest. Obviously, you had a very sports centered upbringing from the research I've done. Netball and other sports, and your parents were into sport as well. But that just stuck out as the sort of thing that maybe would sum up your upbringing with sport. Could you tell me what other ways? What was it like growing up in a sporty household? Are there any other stories that are similar to that, where you were pushed just enough to be able to go beyond what you thought was possible?
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, it was great. Like I said, I had really good exposure from a young age to sports. So my dad played rugby and then went into rugby coaching. And my mum played netball for many years. And as a child, every Tuesday, when it was absolutely Baltic, very similar conditions to what it is now, as a young girl, I used to stand on the sideline and watch my mum play netball. And it was great because as I grew up and continued in sport, actually we did play on the same team for a long time. And it was cool when I was shouting, Mum, pass me the ball. And all the women used to go, oh, that's so cute. They get to play together. But generally, I think being exposed to the sport, it kind of always gave me so many opportunities and avenues, and being in sport growing up, I think gave me this confidence that I could go in and try anything. From even a personal perspective, I always put down to sport actually for teaching me so many things. What's good teamwork, actually how important is having goals in life, always amongst the team working towards kind of the same thing. So I was fortunate enough to kind of see that firsthand from my mum and dad. I mean, story wise, I used to throw myself into everything. So probably one of the stories that sticks out is when I used to do cross country. So I was one of those girls at school where I wouldn't say I forgot my PE kit. I wouldn't say I'd hurt my ankle. I was out there, always running it, super, super keen. And I remember I got through to the county stage, I believe, which is fairly, it was fairly local, kind of, it was obviously local counties, etc. And my dad came with me, and he was one of those parents where on the sideline shouting all the time, you know, bringing me Lucozade and feeding me sweets and stuff. And he kept saying to me, "You're going to do so well in this. You're going to absolutely smash it." And I got there, and I think I came about 70th. And it was a really humbling time. But what I want to pull from this is both my mum and dad have always had the utmost confidence in me, and they've always given me, I think, the support, maybe sometimes when it probably wasn't as true, in terms of my dad saying, "You're going to go and smash this race," but actually I came, you know, quite far down to what I thought I would. But they've always been like, "Go and try it, and if you fail, or if something, you know, bad happens, you know, you learn from it and you pick up and then you move on." So I think that's probably quite a good story that talks about maybe the relationship that I had with my parents, and yeah, and maybe kind of how I moved into sport and where I am now.
Yeah, I think I think that's really beautiful. And for any sort of parents that are maybe listening, maybe they want to get be more encouraging to get their kid into sport. What are the ways, like, so obviously, you know, you went out, you came 70th, it didn't work out. How did they comfort you and make you feel after the race in that example?
I think what both of my parents have always been really good in doing is they've always asked me the right questions. And I know this sounds a bit strange, but I think I've always been a really like curious person. Like, I'm one of those people that I'm like, but why? But why? And I think that's probably why I love the side of kind of coaching and stuff like that. And, you know, even different types of training modalities, etc. So I think going back to that, my mum and dad would always actually ask me the question about my performance. Like, how did you find that? Like, how did you think you did? Rather than sort of constantly telling me and reinforcing me how I did. And then both of them have always been there to sort of help me put plans in place. So, you know, it wasn't just okay, you came 70th, that's kind of it. There wasn't going to be another cross country probably for another year. But off the back of that, it would be an opportunity to go, actually, like, what can we work on? What can we work on that then might translate into your netball game that you've got in a couple of weeks' time? So A, I think it was asking the right questions and putting it more on me. And then B, it wasn't just a hard stop of an event. It was a bit like, how can we take aspects of that and help you improve in different areas?
Yeah, that's awesome. It's like you were taught from a young age to like self-validate and like do your own game tape. That's how it sounds, you know, rather than like seeking it elsewhere. Like, you can ask yourself, like, you know, if anyone's ever been to therapy or they work with a coach, that's what they do. A good coach lets you find the answer, which enables you to have a more stable base to go forward. So that's really cool. Wanted to ask you, actually, I was looking at your background, and I know you did, you know, big old sporting upbringing, went to uni, did netball at uni, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then later in life, CrossFit HYROX.
Mm-hmm.
What's going on in that gap? What's missing?
Okay, so I went to university and actually did advertising and marketing as a degree, but then basically just fell into netball and I was playing constantly. So yeah, it was just surrounded by sport, which was awesome. But I kind of, that made me blank. So my husband is in sport. He plays football, and we've moved around an awful lot in terms of when he changes teams throughout the season. So joining a CrossFit box was always a really good way for me to go and make friends. And for me also, because I kind of loved the idea of the strength and conditioning pieces coming in as one, loved the kind of idea of the classes and stuff. But actually, probably between sort of the netball and the CrossFit days, I did take a little bit of time out. I did some traveling. So, that typical journey that people do, where we did Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia after university. Done it. Where you go and find yourself, all of that good stuff.
How old were you when you did your gap year?
So my gap year, it was after uni. So I went to uni slightly later. So it could have been early 20s.
Okay.
Not 23, actually. 24, sorry, would have been.
Yeah, I was like 27. I was quite late.
Okay.
Which now I think, because I still think about going traveling, I feel like I wish I was 27 because I thought I was old then.
You're never too old to go traveling, though.
True. And, but also, I was going to say, but being the old guy in the hostel, but honestly, I don't know if I'd want to stay in a hostel. I don't think I'd want to stay in a hostel. I'd just shut myself off.
Do you know what? A little secret. So I did go on my gap year with my now husband, and we set out with these really good intentions. We were like, we're going to save loads of money. We're going to go and stay in really cheap hostels. And I remember we arrived in Chiang Mai in Thailand for the first part of our trip. And we did arrive at a hostel, and it was like a dormitory, 2 bunk beds. We were on the top. And we remember laying there that night, looking across each other. There was some really cool people, by the way, loads of elephant pants, stuff.
Yeah, I know the sort.
And we just laid across looking at each other. We were like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Okay, it's £4, but actually the hotel was probably only double or triple that. So when I say going on a gap year, it probably was more like a luxury gap year, in all honesty.
Do you guys must have been together quite a long time then?
Yeah, we've been together 10 years now.
Wow. And you set off traveling together. You came back, because that's sometimes make or break.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, and we did our farm work in Australia, so we thought we did a year because my husband went and played for a Melbourne team at football, and we thought we wanted the second year, so we did our farm work in the Northern Territory in Australia, and we worked on a sandalwood farm and lived in a shipping container for 3 months. So this sandalwood farm, we did night shifts where we'd start at 11 p.m. and we'd finish at 7:30 in the morning. And we used to have these great knapsacks on, a bit like Ghostbuster-esque. And we used to spray all the weeds around the sandalwood, because sandalwood's used for perfume and stuff. And then in the morning, we'd have to get up, put these finish our shift before we went to bed, get these high-vis jackets on, and try and get the kangaroos off the farm. And that in itself, I don't know how we made it through, but now I just think we're unbreakable due to those experiences that we went through when we traveling.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, making it through something and if you can get through it, it makes you so strong. Look at COVID, the couples that could get through COVID, probably together forever. And it's like traveling. You would meet people traveling, and like, oh yeah, I'm with your boyfriend or whatever, and then you'd meet them 6 months later. I'm like, oh, where's he gone? And that would happen a lot. Because people have gone from maybe small towns and they've not really seen other parts of the world before, and then they're opened up. So that's awesome. That's awesome that you've obviously got such a good foundation. And do you have any children or plans for?
Yeah, definitely plans for children. I think Carl is very, very ready, and I'm definitely getting there. But as you know, as an athlete, at the moment, I've got to make sure that my body is ready to race rather than to bear children currently. So yeah, we would definitely like children, but not at this moment in time.
Yeah, that's such a hard balance, isn't it? When when you're doing so well in HYROX and everything, and obviously that is a sacrifice that would have to happen, isn't it? So
yeah, but do you know what's amazing at the moment is women are surrounded by great role models. So particularly in the sport, you have people like Lauren Weeks, you have Meg Jacobi. There's so many women in the elite that have children or have come back after having children and are still performing. You know, Kate Davey, one of my closest friends, still performing at such a high level. And then you have people like Tia Toomey in the CrossFit space who is coming back and doing crazy things. So I think social media particularly is amazing at actually showcasing the fact that just because you have children, it doesn't mean your athletic life is over. In fact, if anything, I look at so many of the women that I'm surrounded by, and I think they have more of this like innate natural strength and resilience from having kids, which I haven't been through an experience that's been able to give me that. So I think if anything, it could be such a huge positive, and to be a role model for your kids as well.
That's cool. Yeah, it's not something I wasn't aware of. I didn't realize Kate had kids. That's so cool. But yeah, awesome. Like I'm trying to speak to more women athletes as well to like learn more about this stuff. And you know how training is different for women and men, and so yeah, hence us chatting today. But I know we don't have too long, so I want to try and get into, because I could just like chat about like traveling and stuff all day.
Too.
So I want to talk about some training stuff, but I wanted to talk about CrossFit actually. So you know you had this like endurance-y kind of background, and then you found CrossFit. How old were you when you found CrossFit?
I was quite old, so it probably would have been mid-20s. Yeah.
And how long did you do that before you transitioned to HYROX?
Probably about three years maybe. But I was kind of doing both. And do you know what? I have loads of clients that are members at like CrossFit boxes who are HYROX affiliates and stuff, and still do bits of CrossFit classes and then obviously programs through me. So they kind of complemented each other really, really well. I think the initial attraction for CrossFit, exactly like you said, it kind of incorporated all of the things that I love. Like I came from a very strength background, both because I loved it from a performance perspective, but also aesthetic perspective, growing up.
Yeah.
And then loved the idea of, I've always had a really good engine. And I think that probably comes from being involved in so many sports. So the fact that you could dabble in a little bit of strength and then, you know, whether it was going on the ergs or do some sort of run, it kind of seemed like the perfect mode of training for me. But I was just never built for the big lifts.
Yeah, well, I think it's like I don't know if you've seen it. Like, there's a bit of a meme on the internet at the moment, which is like there was a reel the other day, and I was like in hysterics because it's like you having a bad like a depressing winter or something, and there's a guy like sort of like jogging along, and it's like HYROX, and it's like put your average running to good use. And I was like, yeah, well, brilliant. Yeah, that's me putting my average running to use. But that's why it is awesome, isn't it? It's like this hybrid thing, because you can kind of use these different elements. If you have something here, then you can maybe apply it in this way. But speaking more about CrossFit, I was thinking it's probably a really, really good base to bring to do before HYROX. You're like, you know, someone like I was talking to someone the other day. They were quite young, and I was saying, honestly, like maybe like start off with CrossFit and then go to HYROX.
Do you know what? You're absolutely right, and I think not that we want to go down this rabbit hole of like which is better, CrossFit, HYROX, because there's so much on the internet and there's keyboard warriors at the moment. But I completely agree. There are, even in my training programs, both that I do for myself and that I program for my clients, I always lean on different types of sports and modalities. And I think you're absolutely right. From that base perspective, if there are opportunities for CrossFit classes, if there aren't HYROX classes, it does give you that really good foundation. And, you know, even things like Olympic lifting, which is probably seen as quite scary and is more technical and complex. But if you learn it in the right way, if we think about things like the clean, power clean, for example, actually barbell movements like that are amazing at trying to improve and create good power, which is also really important for HYROX.
Mm-hmm.
So I think whilst if we looked at both, arguably HYROX would be more accessible for someone going straight into it.
Yes.
But I absolutely agree with you. I think if somebody was looking to just build themselves before going into a race, it would tick a lot of those boxes that HYROX looks at in the race.
Yeah, I was even thinking of like maybe doing a couple of months off season, just CrossFit.
Yeah.
And because at the moment I've had a bit of a running injury, so like I'm a runner, like that's my strength, other than my knees, and so I'm like thinking about taking considerable time off running. Like once I do Glasgow in a few months. So two thoughts there. How much time would you recommend taking off in the off season? Like in that example, for example, so if you've bit of overuse on your knee, how much rest should we, how can we manage that load?
So say if I take you back, like June is normally the HYROX World Championships, right? So that's kind of like that last race of the season. And what I always like to do or recommend to clients is it's really important to take a break from very HYROX specific training. And I would say anywhere between sort of like 1 to even 3 months. That doesn't say take your foot off the gas, put your feet up and don't do any training.
Yeah.
Often we need, and it really is dependent on the person and kind of in line with somebody's like injuries, experience, etc. But both from a mindset perspective and a body perspective, we need that reset and break. I think sometimes because the HYROX season and it's getting longer and longer now, I think the first races probably start in October time and they're going all the way through to June. If people are racing throughout that, yes, you're having deloads and stuff, but actually you're still very much in race mode. So I think what I always like to do is have a good 2 weeks off running when I finish World Championships, and I would bring in different other stimulus. So the ergs, which is like your ski, your row, your bike. There's lots of things that you can do which are deemed off feet in inverted commas, which are a lot less friendlier to our joints, but basically still giving us the same stimulus as in like steady state work, which is kind of what we want to be building up in our off season before we get into race specifics. But in terms of kind of, again, if you're experiencing injury and stuff, I would argue that looking at different variations of sport, like you said, whether it's even getting out on kind of like a mountain bike, whether it's doing CrossFit and more strength orientated work, it's really important to have that break from your specific sport and goals for a short time.
Yeah, I'm like obsessed with this whole off-season thing. Like, I don't know, it just feels like a really good thing to optimize, because, and as well, a lot of the time, most of the time people work with coaches during season. I mean, ideally, if you've got the budget, you should work with a coach all year round, right?
Yeah.
And I did loads of strength. I got like the strongest I've ever been, like in the summer. But what I failed to do, which I'm now paying the price for, I believe, is the accessory stuff, the boring stuff, the rehab, the single leg stuff. I did loads of back squats. But that's what's fascinating about training and doing this is like you're always learning. And it seems to, like you were saying earlier, you get so many lessons through training that apply to life.
100%. And also, I think you've made a really good point. Like, what I tend to find is with lots of clients and even myself, sometimes we really neglect the basics because they're not sexy and they're really boring. And particularly with something like you said with HYROX, when over 50% of the race is running, and also it's very much an endurance sport, we do forget how important things like recovery are if we're looking to kind of build up our running volume. Actually, still how important our top end strength is. Yes, it is an endurance race, but still, actually, we from a future proofing and like longevity perspective, we still want to be making sure we are building strength, so we're not getting any niggles kind of later down the line. And I think there definitely is more even from a recovery standpoint, if I kind of stay on this thread, you've seen all the amount of stuff that's out on social media now, when we have compression boots, we have infrared, we have ice baths. But actually, some people will do all those things, but they'll neglect the basics of sleep and good nutrition and hydration.
Yeah.
And if you can't get your, your foundational bricks or ducks in a row, then actually you're not going to progress, even if you're doing all of these really sexy things that you're seeing other athletes doing that are probably at the top of their game.
Yeah, absolutely. And as well, like, and I love the ice bath, I love the sauna, all that kind of big thing.
Yeah.
But I also think about it like from a chemical perspective. Like they're quite dopaminergic, and what you're looking for is like the serotonin activities, aren't you? Like going out in the woods, walking, when you kind of that's the recovery, isn't it? Not like I'm doing ice baths and then sauna. Like it's kind of more like training, isn't it? Or
Yeah.
an active recovery. But yeah, one of the things I wanted to ask you, actually, you were talking about machines, and being able to reduce the load on your joints. What do you think about machines in general, specifically? Like, what about the bike? Because people talk about the bike erg a lot, and then it's like, oh yeah, if you're not running, you should be on the bike. But then, is there an argument perhaps that maybe doing more skiing or rowing is better because you're then going to help your tank, and then actually you do a lot of rowing and skiing in the event? What do you think about that?
Yeah, so I think it's really interesting actually. I think if you were to look at, and I'm generalizing here, if you were to look at, say, the female elites, and then you look at some of the male elites, you arguably the male elites would do a lot of their steady state stuff on a bike or on erg. And I think that lots of the females, we do a lot of running, so a lot of volume. Now, I don't think there isn't necessarily one that's better than the other if we're thinking about like stimulus and working in heart rate zones and building up our aerobic base, so building up our endurance essentially. As long as it probably depends on how experienced you are on the erg. For example, if you're new on the ski, your heart rate could be jacked up immediately when you're going super slow. So actually, if we're trying to build up and we're trying to put in an easy session for you, it would be better to choose an erg where you're more comfortable, and actually you can sort of get to that steady heart rate and stay within sort of that zone 2, top of zone 3 area. But from a race specific perspective, and one thing I have actually started doing probably in the last maybe 4 to 6 months more, is really bump up the volume of my erg work. And I've almost treated my erg work as I do my running. So whilst I have my steady state stuff, which could more lend itself to maybe active recovery sessions, adding it into conditioning to kind of get more time on feet, I also focus on sort of my threshold pace, which on the ergs is probably something you could hold for about 10K. It's arguably something maybe 8, 12, 15 seconds, depending on the athlete, slower than your race pace. But actually doing longer distances and more volume helps you then to really dial in on things like your breathing, your stroke rate, your technique. And actually then that gives you the confidence, even though it's a 1 kilometer, like I said, you're still kind of getting the stimulus of building up aerobic base, but then actually we're working on technique as well. So it's basically like a 2-in-1. So all of the modals are really, really important, and you can use them in so many different ways. Like the assault bike, let's say, that piece of kit is the devil, right?
Yeah.
It's tough, but what is really good about it is, yes, okay, if we wanted to work at kind of anaerobic efforts, zone 5, like short, sharp intervals is awesome. But also it's good, say we wanted to create the same stimulus of that heavy leg feeling when we come off the sleds, for example, actually doing 8, 10, 12 calories on the assault bike, then going into a station makes it feel much more compromised, and is obviously putting us in that state that we'll feel in the race, so that we're getting that practicing in training.
Yeah, the assault bike's an interesting one, isn't it? And I'm thinking about it then, it's like, well, if you look at the erg bike versus the assault bike, obviously the assault bike, you're using your arms, which is obviously mimicking like the running kind of, because you obviously move your arms. So yeah, that feels like maybe an underutilized asset for even like your steady state stuff, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I do loads of steady state stuff on the assault bike, and it
Mm,
initially, so I have normally kind of like RPMs to work towards, so sort of in line with intensity and effort, which will change the more experienced you become. But I think it's great doing work on there because, like you said, it's almost a bit like a resistance exercise as well, if you think about it,
hmm
because it's kind you're having to drive your legs, and it is more of like a single leg kind of force that you have to create rather than probably something that's a little bit more streamlined on the Concept 2 bike.
mm.
So yeah, it works from both like a power output aspect, cardiovascular, and then a little bit of resistance as well.
Yeah, that's cool. Um, Question actually, I was just thinking then when I so if I go on a bike,
Mm.
it takes me forever to get up to zone two. So I did a session the other day, and then I had to go and get on the assault bike and then a ski to actually get my heart rate up to zone two. So I'm like, okay, so that's one part of it. Then I get on the bike and I'm in zone two, and I do a 60-minute test. That feels to me like a best effort in zone
Mm-hmm.
two.
Mm-hmm.
What's going on there? Is it because it's like isolated, like the bottom half of your body, and therefore you've got to work harder to get into that zone?
Do you know what is tough, right? There's a couple of things. So first off, like your heart rate and your zones are very particular and individual to you. And let's always caveat things by saying your heart rate can be impacted by lots of things. So
Mm,
how much sleep you've had, dehydration, what you've done before that session, for example. So lots of things. And if you look at kind of your heart rate, probably some people have gone, well, I did the same run last week and it felt the same, but my heart rate was in zone 4 or zone 5 and it just
yeah.
couldn't come down. So there's lots of kind of things feeding into that. But yeah, you're absolutely right. In terms of why does it stay steady state, it is because it is a very I suppose, a very slow and stable movement in terms of when you're on the bike. If you think about maybe the row and the ski, for example, you're using basically your full body and having to create a lot more force to create the momentum. But
Mm,
it's very, in terms of zones, and I always recommend, particularly with steady state stuff, there is an ideal that you want to get to of trying to ensure that my clients and myself are staying within a particular zone.
hmm
But I also caveat it with is you need to make sure that you're also aware of the metrics like RPE, like
hmm
the almost the conversation test.
Yeah.
Can you actually keep a conversation whilst you're working? And then that will better ensure that you are working to the right degree that you need to for that session.
Mm. Yeah, that makes sense. It's funny because it's just like it seems conflicted because if I say if I go for a zone two run,
Mm-hmm.
usually like it's not too much of an issue to get up to that level, and then you're
Mm-hmm.
in a like a battle to keep it below threshold.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like on the bike, it seems like slightly different. Whereas like it took me forever to get up to it, but then when I actually get there, it's. But also,
Yeah.
I don't guess I don't do much on the bike, so it could be partly that as well.
Yeah, potential. And also, you think even when you go on a run, there's so many things that could potentially look to spike your heart rate quite quickly, whether it is
Mm,
like dodging people, whether it's,
yeah.
you know, uneasy pavements,
Someone's
etc.
dog running out. That's one
Yeah.
that happens all the time.
Yeah, when you're on a bike, yeah, it's
Yeah.
obviously kind of like a much more almost controlled and a controlled environment, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Um okay, station weaknesses. So if we like look at it in a like real autistic spreadsheet way, which HYROX is great for that. And you look at your stations, you go, right, okay, so I'm weak on lunges and wall balls. Actually, that's one of
Hmm.
mine, really. How do we assess whether it's actually the lunges and the wall balls or whether it's the endurance of them, the fact that they are later in the race?
Mm. Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think that probably comes back to like understanding maybe like individual strengths, etc. I think one of the things that I like to do with a lot of my clients, And you have to, again, like, use the data, but you also have to understand, I need feedback. I need verbatim feedback from how you have been feeling in that station, and kind of, how long is it taking you maybe to get back to the pace, or what did you sort of feel like? Was there any burning sensation in your legs or upper? And they would be the sort of key questions that I would ask, particularly around the lunges and wall balls. If you think about them as stations, they're obviously they're leg dominant, right? So arguably you would say quad dominant as well, with the way that lots of us lunge and obviously squat. So you would mechanically probably relate that to potentially need to work on either single leg strength or muscular endurance. And then, but if from a running perspective, I guess we always need to be looking at building out our aerobic base and improving our endurance there. Like 70 to 80% of the running volume that I do is easy. And I think it's probably looking at those both in isolation in your training to understand, actually, if we were to look at a conditioning piece that was the length of maybe a HYROX, are you naturally starting to fatigue actually the further down you get and the longer it goes on? Or actually, is it more you're fine, but it's the single leg work and it's the endurance specifically that's holding you back because your legs are just on fire, or you physically, your shoulders are gone in the wall balls, for example, and you can't continue. So it's about dissecting both of those things and looking at the data and both your feedback to understand maybe where the weaknesses are to work on any training.
Yeah, no, that's really useful, because as soon as you said it, I was like, well, no, my runs are actually solid. So actually, like at Birmingham, my last run was like the top 1%,
Right.
but my lunges weren't great. And then I fell apart at the wall balls, probably because I pushed it a little bit too hard on the run. So yeah, so aerobically, I was fine. So that would tell you it's more localized muscular endurance rather than the aerobic base.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, compromised running as a skill in HYROX, as we all know, is super, super important. So having the ability to go and hold your race pace after a station is key and needs to be practiced, because if we think about all of the stations almost like on an intensity graph, for you, if it's out of 10, for example, the lunges for you might be a 9, and we know that's going to have a huge impact actually on you getting back to your race pace. So whether then we'd look at strategy and go, okay, Jason, I've seen you stepping through without taking that extra break on the lunges. We're going to try in the last 20 meters, you're going to actually add in a step and almost a very short second, just to give yourself almost that ability to recover, because then you can hit that run and get back to your pace and go into the wall balls feeling a little bit fresher.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's cool. Thank you. What about training volume and load? Because one of the things I've seen recently, in general, like it feels like most people talk about, loading up the legs day after day gets you more resilient, increases your endurance. But I saw something the other day which is like kind of pushing back on that a little bit and talking about minimal effective dose and people are training too much. What are your thoughts on that?
I absolutely agree. I would say probably about 60-70% of some of my clients that come to me in that original call, I would often say they are training far too much or doing too many high demand, high intense sessions back to back. And I think even on social media, there's almost this idea like work ethic has to be through the roof. You sleep when you're dead. You have to work 110% all the time. And I think it doesn't help, because you look at HYROX and you go, oh my goodness, there is so much to train. I have to get my running in. I've got to build the strength. But this is the importance about not even necessarily working with a coach, but actually prioritizing and understanding primary and secondary goals of your training block, because it's absolutely impossible to do everything at once. Yes, you can absolutely build strength and you can improve your running, but you were right in what you said. It's about the dose and then ensuring that you have quality sessions through the week. So for example, like I said earlier, in my running, my running volume is high. We get up to, I think probably my highest might have been late 80s, 90 kilometers per week, right? Which is a lot when also I've got my strength stuff, my conditioning, etc. But the detail is in the dose. So I know every Tuesday and every Thursday are my 2 quality double threshold sessions, which means threshold in the morning running, which is kind of like my race pace. So probably for an individual, what's their 10-kilometer average pace at different work to rest ratios to really help me actively and intuitively be able to run at that pace in race. And then in the PM, it's more of an erg threshold, which I touched on earlier. So again, kind of that uncomfortable, comfortable pace, but a variation of distances. And they are really my 2 quality sessions in the week that I want to make sure that I'm going in feeling great for. And I think also with the whole idea of a hybrid training program, that's what you need to strive for. You need to strive for feeling great for 80-90% of your sessions. Thursday comes along for me, which is active recovery. And I'm like, yeah, do you know what? I'm ready. I'm ready to kind of lower my running and stuff. But never do I go in, and I hope lots of my clients will say this, never do I go in, I've got really bad DOMs or feel like I can't bring a really good quality like side of myself to the session because I'm struggling from a previous one.
Yeah. No, that makes total sense. What do you think about rest day? So for example, today's my rest day, but I really like starting the day with something just to get my brain going. So I usually do like a 10-minute EMOM and try and just like hit most body parts. So I'm not putting too much load on one part. Is that okay?
Yeah, I absolutely love that. I think, look, it comes down to you just have to remember your rest day or active recovery day is supposed to be where you recover. Therefore, you do not want to be doing anything that's giving you too much fatigue or is going to put too much stress on our nervous system. So for lots of my clients, some of them, in terms of where they are in their block, some of them it might be complete rest day, but it doesn't mean, again, sit on the couch. It could be still get out and do your 8, 10, 12,000 steps. But for some of them, even like you, I understand that from a well-being and mental capacity perspective, I'm the same. I feel like I need to do something to start my day because it's part of my routine.
Yeah.
It's innate. But as long as you are really clear and you're doing an EMOM that, again, isn't going to be too strength-based or too high in demand, I think that's absolutely fine and would encourage that. I think you just need to listen to your body to make sure that you are working at the right intent for where you are in the week.
Yeah, like I wouldn't do anything that had, like, if I had massive DOMs in my biceps, I wouldn't be throwing in bicep curls or anything like that. But no, that's interesting. Thank you. Okay, I know we've not got too long. I have like millions of questions. So I'm like,
Okay.
all right. Intra-race fueling. Do you use gels?
I have only recently started using gels, actually. Never used to, never drink water, always try and practice in terms of like my longer conditioning pieces to do the same in training so that I'm not desperate for it. However, I do use intragels. So I either use something like basic honey. So there's a honey top gel that I use.
Same.
Or I've used the Morton MAURTEN gels, which are great. I tend to try and stay away from caffeine within race, just because you never know what it's going to be like in terms of your stomach.
Yeah.
But I would always have more of like a caffeine based. I've got work with ESN who do some great products as well before race. But yes, I try and have a carb based electrolyte gel during the race, which kind of does both. So it gives you the energy, but also is there to hydrate you. I just sometimes forget to take it.
I've gone to town on the gels, actually. I've really tried to try and see how many I can, get up to that like 80 grams per hour that they talk about, which has worked well for me because I've struggled with cramp and stuff in the past, and it seems to work. But my question a follow-up question to that is like, how do you look at it in like a doubles event or a relay? Can you tell I've got both of them coming up? How do you, so like, let's say I'm used to doing like 3 to 4 gels in a singles in an hour. How would you then look at like a doubles or a relay?
So doubles, I would always, I mean, I only have one gel, and for a lot of my clients, I recommend kind of between, 1 to 2, depending on the time they're going to finish in. When it comes to doubles, I wouldn't say it's too dissimilar to singles, in all honesty, of when and how much to take. So for me, if I were to take normally one gel in my singles, actually when you're doing the row as a doubles, that's kind of the longest time that you're going to get where you're going to be standing still. So you have the ability to take it. Also, what you could do is, if you think that a full gel is probably quite a lot during the doubles, because you do have that longer rest period, I know it's sometimes a bit of a nightmare to carry. I would say maybe have like half probably earlier than the row, and then the other half at the row. So spread it out a little bit, because you are working kind of really intensely, then your heart rate's coming back down. Now in the relay, I mean, I didn't take anything in the country relay. I don't think, as long as you're fueling, because I know it's still working intense, but you're only doing the 2 runs and the 2 stations. I think really the fueling, your meal, 2.5, 3 hours before you actually start the race, would be more than sufficient. And also you find that a lot of people they would have done a race and then they do the relay. And sometimes if you've already had a couple of gels in an earlier race, the last thing you want to be doing is potentially loading your body too much. You maybe want to focus on an actual meal itself to fuel.
Yeah, that's cool. Thank you. Right, I've got. I want to make sure I ask some of these audience questions. Okay, so Liam W says, "What are three movements we should all be doing to get better at burpees?"
Oh, I like this. Okay, so from a strength perspective, got to be barbell bench. 100%. So again, you can look at different rep ranges there. So I know the audience will probably know this, but if we're thinking more of like a top end strength, you're looking at maybe 1 to 5. And if you're looking more at hypertrophy, which is correlated to like muscle size and mass and endurance, you're kind of looking anywhere between that sort of 6, 12, 15. So definitely barbell bench press. Hand release push-ups or push-ups. Again, like body weight movements are so overlooked. You do not have to have a weight in your hand all the time. Actually, this gives you your weight. And as you know, when you're going to do the burpee broad jumps, you're only pushing yourself. So I think hand release push-ups teaches you to be in that really good position, also teaches you to engage your core as well, which is super important. And then lastly, I'd probably have to throw a plyometric in there. So I would do things like a box jump, which again, like a burpee box jumps even, or adding box jumps after maybe a strength exercise to hopefully build your explosive power. Again, really trying to make sure that you are getting as far as you can and using that broad jump.
Could you put all those together, like do like strength reps, and then hand release push-ups, and then finish with the box?
Yeah, of course you can. I mean, it's called, I believe it's called the French contrast method,
right,
which is quite similar to that, but it's a method that is used to basically create explosive power. So what people do is they do strength rep of maybe like a compound lift, which exactly could be a bench. Then they'd go into something, maybe it's more weighted. So it could be, you could be holding 2 dumbbells and do standing broad jumps or something like that. And then they would go into body weight. And again, then they go into power, so it could be a box jump. And again, that would massively help to create kind of both strength endurance, but also hit power as well, which is a 3-in-1.
So fun. I love this stuff. Jade B says, how much time do you spend on mobility work each week?
Oh, I could lie. I really could lie and say I'm great. I'm terrible. This is one of my 2020.
Not as I do.
Yeah, this is one of my 2025 intentions. I really have tried to start including more mobility, both in my warm-ups and my cool downs, because my routine is already stacked. And I know like adding in 1-2 specific sessions isn't going to cut it for me because I don't have the time at the moment. So I am trying to be more conscious of doing things when I'm like already in, in my gym attire, ready to go. But in terms of mobility and recovery, I try and make sure that I do, I would say at least an hour to an hour and a half a week, which probably isn't enough. And then I do get a sports massage once a week as well, which I always feel really helps in terms of getting rid of any aggravation and tightness. But there's so much more to be done for me, and it's so important.
Yeah, appreciate your honesty. Jamie B says, how do you stay motivated during tough training weeks?
Oh, this is a good question. And you know what? This is a question that I'm asked by a lot of my clients, and I've been trying to help them because we've just come off the back of Christmas festive period. Everyone sort of goes out of their normal routine, eats differently. I think it goes back to training is my non-negotiable. Like I'm fortunate enough, like we said earlier, to have grown up in an environment where training has always been part of my day. And that's how I see it. Training is like brushing my teeth to me. So motivation isn't always going to be there for you. And I know it's probably something that you might see written on a wall, but you can't rely on motivation. You have to rely on discipline.
Yes.
And I think it also links in with, I've got big goals this season, and lots of my clients have big goals. They basically could just be to improve my HYROX. And I think as long as you are fully committed and you fully believe in your goals, I think even on the dark and rough days, you've just got to keep thinking about ticking the boxes and moving forward.
Yeah, I feel like it's all to do with that, like your identity, isn't it? Once you become like the sort of person who trains every day, that's so hard to undo.
Yeah.
Like I'm exactly like the same with that now. Is taking a rest day is more difficult, and once you get into that space, that's a totally different battle.
Yeah. And also, just lastly, like find something you enjoy. Like so many times at this time of year, we make goals, but often you find people are creating goals that aren't necessarily linked to themselves and what they enjoy. So just because running
Yeah.
is the really cool thing to do at the moment, if you don't like running and you actually enjoy going to do yoga, or actually you really enjoy going on the stepper, like find things that gives you that excitement to go and do them, rather than just feel you have to do something because your friendship group or other people or you've seen on social media do it.
Yeah, that's a really good insight. Okay, I've a quick fire round that I've put together. See what you think of this. So it's called overrated and underrated.
Mm-hmm.
So most overrated food, most overrated and underrated food, and I've got some others.
Okay, most underrated food, underrated beetroot. Most overrated. Oh, this is hard, man.
While we move to another one, it might come to you.
Yeah. Okay.
Overrated and underrated exercise.
Oh, most underrated exercise would be the leg press, particularly for people that are looking to build both strength and endurance, and maybe more of a beginner that aren't too familiar with things like barbell movements. The leg press
Much
is
safer,
great.
isn't it?
And yeah, and also you can, when you're trying to hit either glutes, quads, hamstrings, etc., you just can move your feet, toe positioning, which I think is great. Most overrated exercise, something like a barbell snatch.
Interesting.
Yeah, I just
Okay.
think there's so many better variations to, and this is maybe talking to me because I just didn't enjoy that lift at CrossFit, but there's so many other variations that are better.
Yeah.
For power.
Which variation would be better?
I would, well, even look at like a dumbbell snatch or kettlebell swing. Kettlebell swing is great. American kettlebell swing.
Yeah. This isn't included, but what do you think, like, best lat activation? This is
Lat
for me.
activation.
Yeah.
I mean, in my warm ups, I would look at banded work. So whether you're doing like banded pull downs, banded rotations, even things like cable face pulls are really good.
Yeah.
Things that time under tension, right? You don't need to be focusing on weight. It's just, reps and ensuring it's like that mind to muscle connection.
Yeah. Said that because I quite like the snatch deadlift
Do you?
for that. Well, I hate it, but it's a weakness. So like when I get in that position, I've not done much CrossFit. I'm like, my lats are on fire.
Yeah. Okay.
But I'm like, I try and make a note as well. Okay, that was tough. But need to do more of that. That's like a signal. Okay, overrated, underrated supplement.
Underrated supplement has to be creatine.
Mm-hmm.
Underrated, yeah. Overrated has to be something like vitamin C that you can get from basic foods and drinks.
Yeah, cool. And last one, habit.
Oh, most underrated habit, getting enough sleep. Most overrated habit would be, I'd probably have to say like constant infrared saunas or something. But I know they're great. I'm just having to think on the spot.
Yeah. No,
But
that's my fault. I didn't give you this in advance. So
yeah.
We food. We had what was it? Underrated was beetroot. Overrated. Does it come to you?
Oh, I really got one.
If it comes, we can always put it in the show notes when you message me later. When it comes to you in the shower.
2 a.m.
Yeah.
My lack of quality sleep. So I was thinking about the most overrated foods.
Sorry, you're a bit of a guinea pig on that one. That's a new thing that I've introduced. So perhaps I'll prep guests in advance.
Yeah, cheers.
All right. So thank you so much. This has been awesome. I could have gone on for hours asking you all these geeky questions. I just want to ask you before we finish, how you find it competing at the top level.
In all honesty, I think it's something that over the past year, since being part of a lot of the majors, which is where the top 15 women in the world compete, I found it a lot easier to deal with. I think at the start of the season in my first major, I had massive imposter syndrome. I felt that because I only had probably a previous year within HYROX before I got to that level, I was like, I don't know if I really belong here. And it's super scary because loads of the amazing women that I get to race alongside, I'd been watching for so long in awe, thinking, oh my goodness, I would love to do that one day. But it was kind of a stretch goal. But now I think, like anything, when you do things more, you become more experienced, you become better at dealing with your emotions. And also with the training, all of my daily training is evidence that I stack up to go, I absolutely know that I can do really well in this race. And that's also where your belief comes in. So I think whilst you're always on this kind of emotional roller coaster, and there will always be times of doubt before I go on the start line, I'm like, have I got this in me today? Actually, you've just got to think of, the hours that you put into yourself. If you do the right training and equip yourself in the right way and look after yourself, you give yourself no excuses to be able to go in and perform in a race.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, and what can we expect from you in 2025? I had to check. I looked at the bottom of the screen and I'm like, to get the date right.
I keep doing that. All the days are molding into one still, aren't they? Okay, so my big goals for 2025. I will be qualifying for the Elite 15 at one of the upcoming majors. So to be in the Elite 15 at World Championships, myself and teamie Kate Davey will be coming together to do the Elite doubles. So a qualification there for Worlds, which would be awesome. And who knows? I don't know if the country relay is happening, but I would certainly like to be a part of it again. But but also even like I've got loads of personal goals. And this is what I always want to say to the audience, like despite having sporting goals, I also have like personal and business goals as well. And actually one of the things is to be a bit more present with my close family and friends, because life can be hectic and crazy and you end up giving no time to the people that really care. So don't forget all the really important personal goals as well.
Yeah, I'm laughing because I'm so aware of this, where I'm like, I've got this chart on the wall and I've got like and I have to like make sure I do a maintenance goal once a week. You know, like, because I'm always like primary goal, primary goal, primary goal. And I'm like, okay, what do I need to maintain so that your life doesn't fall apart? And like, and I'm,
Exactly.
you know, and I'm not, I mean, mine's like podcasting HYROX, and then I've got relationships. Yeah. So, when's your next race? That's what I wanted to ask.
2nd of February. Well, sorry, it's the Friday before. It's Las Vegas. So 3 weeks time.
Fancy.
Cool. Can't wait.
Exciting. All right. Okay. So where can I point people? Where can they find you if they want to learn more about your stuff? And feel free to like plug you away for your coaching and stuff if you would like.
Yeah, of course. So you can find me at Coached by Zara on Instagram. Like you introduced me as, I am an online coach. I would say I do work with a lot of HYROX athletes, but I also work with a lot of people just wanting to create better habits in kind of nutrition and training space. And then I do work with some really cool brands that I need to plug. So Puma, amazing, by the way, new trainer kit drop yesterday, which is very exciting, built for athletes, which you've probably seen all the bags and the patches. They are definitely dominating
Cultish.
and they're an amazing brand. Yeah, Cultish. And then ESN as well for all my products, which are great from a nutrition standpoint.
Amazing. All right. Well, yeah, thank you again for this. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing how you get on this season. And yeah, good luck in Las Vegas. And I'll speak to you soon.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Hey guys, it's me. Thank you so much for watching that episode and congratulations for making it all the way to the end. I really appreciate it. A few things before you get going. If you haven't already, please do subscribe. And if you enjoyed this episode, the kindest thing you can do for me is to share it with a friend or family member. Don't forget to check out the show notes for links to both my guests and myself. And if you made it this far, why don't you drop me a DM?